makes sense, you help me. He dried my tears away and gave me a brighter day.
Hello, and welcome to GCMS Podcast. I am author Tanisha R. Franklin, and I am the author of the series God Changed My Story. I am so happy to be on tonight and doing another recording with you tonight. So tonight is going to be a little bit different. How about this month? The month of May is Mental Health Awareness Month. So this month I have my son on with me, Charles Thomas. He goes by CJ. Say hi, CJ.
Hi.
So we're running the show a little different tonight because of Mental Health Awareness Month, and I just want to let anybody know that's out here dealing with something that it's okay not to be okay. And I say that because so many times we feel that it's something wrong when we're not okay. So tonight we're gonna kind of go over some stuff about mental health on tonight. So as always, you can follow me on my Facebook and IG page. You can get more information about my podcast and about my books. And as always, don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel at GCMS, which is capitalized, God Changed My Story, so you can see the recordings. And I have previous recordings up on my YouTube channel. So let's get started on tonight. So I'm going to start as always. I'm going to go ahead and read a scripture. I'm coming from John 16 and 33, and I'm going to be reading from the Tony Evans Bible. And it says, I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. You will have suffering in this world. Be courageous. I have conquered the world. So keep that in mind. That's coming from John 16 and 33. And so what I'm going to do is get started, and I'm going to be reading from my book, my second book, God Changed My Story After Healing a New Beginning. I'm going to be reading from page 66 on tonight. And it says, well, I wrote, instead of say it says, I wrote, trust God's plan and not your pain. God is love, and he loves us so much. And if we really trust him, he will make everything okay. Remember, God will only move on his time and when he feels like you are ready. If you have read my first book, then you know my favorite scripture is 2 Corinthians 5 and 7. For we walk by faith and not by sight. So continue walking by faith and stay encouraged. So I wanted to kind of read on that and then go over our topic on tonight. And the topic on tonight that God gave me is better days are coming. And when I was writing that particular passage in my book, I was going through some things in my life. And during that time, I wanted to give up. I was embarrassed. I didn't want to talk about it. And it was a hard time for me because at that time, I didn't know who to talk to because I didn't want anybody to talk about what I was going through or go to someone else and talk about it. And so I began to feel like I couldn't seek help. And that's not always true. If you're going through something, seek help. It wasn't until God sent me someone. I met her and she became my therapist. And God allowed me to be able to talk to her. Always go to God for direction. When you're going through things, don't talk to everybody about what you're going through because some people don't want to see the best for you. And I say that because some people want to see you down or beneath them. And sometimes when you go to people, instead of them encouraging you or telling you what to do, they will talk about you behind your back. And I'm not saying that in a mean way. I just want to say, watch your circle. I talked about that before in some of my other podcasts. Just watch who you're around and seek God for direction when you are going through things. Because sometimes we feel like the people that are close to us we can talk to, but sometimes God may be saying no. God will send you people to talk to when you're going through. He will tell you who to talk to. He will tell you where to go. And in this particular situation, God sent me to a particular therapist because she had already been through what I had been going through, and she understood exactly what I was going through. And sometimes I always say on my podcast, I never say that I understand what somebody is going through. I always say I can relate because we all go through things differently. And in the situation, me and her went through the exact same thing. But here I was sitting here balled up, feel like this was it for me. But here was, she was out here promoting, and she always had a smile on her face. And when she gave me her testimony, I began to cry and I began to ask God to forgive me, because at some point in my life, I feel like I didn't want to be here anymore because I couldn't in this situation, I couldn't help my son. So it was just something with my son. I couldn't help him. And so at that point, I was just like, God, there's no way for me. If I can't help him, then why am I even here? Why did you even give me my son? Why did you even allow me to be his mother when I can't even help him? When God had to remind me that just like I had to go through things, my mother couldn't help me. And so at the same time, that was my testimony. I wrote about it in my books. God changed my story. And so God began to tell me that my son had his own story. And so he began to tell me that there's things that my son is going to share with me, and there's going to be some things that he's not. There's some things that he's going to directly share with God, and there's things that God is only going to want him to share with him and not other people. And during that time, God began to show me this lady, because of the fact he said, look at her. She went through something more tragic than you, but she's smiling. And not one time did you ever know her story until she heard you tell what was going on, and she began to tell you her story. And God said, I want you to hear that, because here it is. You're sitting here ready to give up when all you got to do is get up and fight, and your son is still here. But this particular lady, her son wasn't here anymore. But instead of her, I'm pretty sure she had her time, and she still has her time. But instead of her staying stuck there, she got up and began to keep her son memory alive. And so that's what I say. You have to go to God for direction. And I was bad at that. A lot of times I went to my friends first and I didn't go to God. And a lot of times my friends will say, I'm going to pray for you. Not saying they didn't pray for me, but a lot of times I think that's just common for some people. They'll say, I'll pray for you. But at the same time, God had to ask me, do you know they praying for you? I really did not know that. But I know I could go to God, and I know that God would keep me, and he would keep on keeping me through the situation. And so that's where this passage of the book came from. And I wanted to read that because I want anybody that watched this episode of my podcast to be encouraged, because we do go through a lot, but yet God is still there. He never leaves us and he never forsakes us. So just keep your head up and stay encouraged. And so tonight's topic is better days are coming. If you stand still and allow God to direct you, you'll see that better days are coming. When we try not to do things ourselves, we see that better days are coming. So I don't want to keep talking. I want to kind of not give the mic to my son, but allow him to talk. If you guys read my first book, I opened up about some things my son was going through, but I did not tell his story. So I just want him to get on and just kind of talk about whatever it is, that it's okay not to be okay. If he wants to talk about a story, he can. If not, then that would be another episode, or he might even have a book to write later. So go ahead, Mr. CJ.
Yeah, my name's CJ. It's Mental Health Awareness Month, and I've been through some mental health. I still go through some mental health, but I just have to come back and find my faith in God. God tests you, and I'm still in my season. God plants seeds. And if or grow plants or flowers, seeds have their season where they grow and they bloom, and I just keep my faith in God. But as a young kid, I've been through some trauma, some abuse, and that affected me. And I thought keeping it hidden away from my parents and grandparents and just family, friends in general, would just help the situation. Because I just thought that it wasn't important, just having a kid's mindset. And obviously, I was still scared that I've been through down that road. So I thought, if I open up, I might lose this person, I might lose that person. And that brought me through a lot of suffering, a lot of anxiety, some anxiety that still comes today. Like I said, I still suffer to this day, but just praying and just growing up and just learning how to be a man. But from a young age, I would say from the age of 4, I suffered through a lot of abuse, and that affected me a lot, and just I think that what got me through life and through my situations of suicide would be just God. I grew up in the church, I was always going to church, and I always told myself I wouldn't go back, but I still do to this day because I know that's the right thing to do. And our faith is tested at the end of the day. So I kind of committed myself back into faith. I lost my faith in high school when I was going to different mental hospitals. I didn't think that God was there, and I didn't think he was real, but I thought about it on like my last attempt on my life that hey, I've been trying to harm myself this whole time. Doctors aren't that great, it has to be a higher power. And I was just like, you know what, God, you are real, even though you've put me in these situations, and I've always used to think that I was the only one going through what I was going through, but I mean, I've been around friends. I've lost friends. I've had situations how I've lost friends, but that, like I said, we all have seasons, and I got put back in my season, and like I said, I'm still in my season today. So struggling with mental health growing up, at first it wasn't really hard because, hey, you're a kid, you're playing, you're having fun, but once you get into high school and you start to grow, and then you're in school and school is overwhelming and you're just bored and you start to get trapped. And that's what I did a lot growing up throughout high school. I would just be trapped in my room playing my game, not wanting to do anything, just tired. And I would say just anxious about everything, but just I kind of gained an attitude, people would tell me what's wrong and I would just push them off, just like leave me alone, don't talk to me, because in my head, I tell somebody that I think I trust one day, and then, your business gets everywhere else. So I just held it in, instead of going to God, I came to myself, and that led to me trying to take pills and harm myself multiple times. But like I said, it got worse being in school. I would go to school happy, smile on my face, and then I would go home, and then I would just go in my room, and my room was always my peace, but it stopped being my peace because when you play the game 24/7 out the day, you don't really make time for yourself. It's like, okay, I'm making time for myself, but it's not the good reality of making time for myself, and it just puts you in a lockbox, in a locked place, and I had to get myself out of that situation. And one of those keys were just being able to go to counseling, finding a good counselor. It took a while for me to find somebody I trust because I really didn't trust anyone. I didn't trust my parents, didn't trust my grandparents. I didn't trust anyone, so it kind of opened my eyes, especially when I hit 18 and adulthood came, and it opened my eyes to see like, hey, you're going to have your own family one day. If you want to succeed in life, you got to give everything to God, because nothing's ever going to be easy. I wake up almost every day anxious sometimes, tired, annoyed, stressed, but prayer can do a lot. Even when you feel like God's not talking to you, he hears you at the end of the day. So a simple prayer, waking up, or you don't even have to speak it. You just close your eyes. God's in your mind, God's everywhere. God's in your dreams.
I don't want to cut you off, but would you say that a lot of this came from trying to figure out who you were? Because I know you said that when you went to high school, you know, it was a lot of different things. And I know, just me personally, as your mom, you know, we don't really talk, but I know as a kid, which I just want to say this too. I don't think that I think I may have said this and I may have not said this to you, but I am glad that you spoke up because a lot of things that you went through, I went through as a kid and I held it in and it affected me. But would you say that it's a lot of it is trying to fit in or trying to figure out where you fit in at as a when you go into high school? Is that where you kind of, because I know you say, well, when I got in high school, it was this and it was that. It was different from being in elementary and being in middle school. You're going to, and you went to a whole different school.
Yeah.
You know, a whole different experience. So you're around your friends for what, 3-4 years?
Yeah.
I think it was in junior high, and then, you know, you went to somewhere way bigger and a bigger, let's say, a better experience than what I would say I had in high school. It was a lot more where you went.
Yes and no.
Okay.
I mean, playing football was like the key point of me making friends. It was, you know, a lot of inner city kids that we played that I didn't know because I was so young. But it was easy making friends, and then I made friends with their friends, and you know, we got close. But at the same time, I was trying to fit in, but I wouldn't say I was trying to fit in at the same time because I've had friends, but I've always stayed to myself. So it wasn't hard to fit in because having that football background, and I mean the first 2 weeks it was hard school-wise, but the atmosphere made me very comfortable because I would say it was a way better school than what I went to. Everybody talked to each other. Food was better. So, you know, those little things just caught my eyes, you know. Bigger locker room in football, bigger stadium, just had all these opportunities and chances, you know. First time I've ever seen a weight room and first time I could just come in there freely. I mean, I always got dropped off early, so I mean, I was in a comfortable situation where I could open up, and some players on the team understood me, and I made some of the greatest friends there. Couple I still talk to this day, you know, but some of them I don't because you move your separate ways, but it wasn't that hard fitting in, so I really didn't need to try. I say the only thing was, you know, was trying to update the style of, you know, how I talk. You know, I was trying to be somebody else when I really didn't have to be. So.
Okay, so that makes sense. Okay, and I think like the biggest thing too is that when you're in that situation, I know I heard you say like you felt like you didn't understand. Why am I going through this? And why is God doing this to me? And things like that. And I think a lot of times we look at like that now, what we're going through now, versus of where we've been through and where it's taken us. Even as a young age, you don't kind of see that. You know, you don't see those things. Because even as a kid, I was there too. I experienced a lot. You read my book. You didn't read your mom book. Okay. But like, I mean, a lot of stuff that I dealt with, like for you, I noticed with me where I had to change when you went through all of this is God spoke to me and said, listen to him. That's all he wants is for you to listen to him. And you know, sometimes you can talk and you'll say some things that's like, I'm like, CJ, come on. But it was the fact that when I began to listen to you, our relationship got better. But I didn't know as a mom, I didn't get listened to. It's not that I purposely projected that, but that's something I never wanted to do. But I end up doing that to you because the same thing happened to me. I didn't notice I was doing it until God really brought it to my attention. But with your story, do you find yourself telling other people your story? Do you feel ashamed to talk about your story?
No, I don't feel ashamed. I mean, When I was working at the hospital as a security officer a few months back,
Mm-hmm.
you know, my story has helped people, and it hasn't helped people, but when the opportunity is there, when you see someone that's going through what you are similar, and they're in the hospital hooked up to IVs, trying to harm themselves, or just in general,
Mm-hmm.
when you explain somebody that you were going somewhere similar,
Mm-hmm.
you were going through something similar, they are, they kind of stop, and a few people
Mm-hmm.
cried. They're like, I feel like I was the only one. No one ever listens to me, and
Mm-hmm.
that was the problem with me as well. It was always, you need to go here to get help, or you need to take this medication, you need to take that medication, and it was just like, well, I go to a mental hospital, they prescribe medication, they ask me how I feel, but they don't really mean it, because at the end of the day, it was always their job, and I felt like no
Mm-hmm.
one was actually listening to me. And that's kind of where it opened my eyes, especially being in that setting, because it was like, okay, we have social workers, but they do this job every day.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, are they listening? So when a guy like me, the job, someone comes in with mental health problems, security officer always has to watch the door, or they have to be on their 24 hours uh, surveillance. So I would just go in there and I would just talk, and they'd just be like, well, you look like your life's back on track, straight on. And I'm just like, yeah, no, that's not the truth. No, I'm going through things, and that kind of where my mental health became bad,
Mm-hmm.
because being around that new environment, I would say I went to Granville. So Granville, it's a lot of wealth, um, a lot of knowledge to learn about wealth, and I was surrounded by that. And I've had a good childhood. I've got things I wanted. It was always tough times. And as a kid, you see those tough times as well. But when I would have always go over friends' house, they'd always have, I wouldn't say a new car, but when you see your friend driving a nice F-150 or just a nice car in general, you're like, and you're already going through the stuff you're going through, you're like, dang, and like, even because when I graduated too, I was still going through a lot. Even
Mm-hmm.
when you graduate and you see all your friends going to college, um, I mean, even with college was always on my mind too. Parents
Mm-hmm.
always asked me about college, but at the same time, I did want to go to college, but I always pushed it off just because, you know, I, I wouldn't say I felt poor, but, seeing what I saw, it was always like, dang, I want these things, but I don't have to have it like that. But I just want to feel free. And I felt trapped in my own body,
Mm-hmm.
and I felt like my soul didn't have the the space to feel peace and alive, and that's why, it's like, okay, maybe I need to get out of Michigan, and go explore life, and go have some fun, and I was able to break that first barrier, and it was like, okay, let me go to school. And I went back to school, and it's just, now, being grown, it's like I get to breathe fresh air, I don't think about harming myself anymore. One, because I have faith, I put God first, then I put myself first, and
Mm-hmm.
I finally get to breathe. It's more out there. I took a trip to Florida last month for a business conference, and I haven't been on the plane since I was probably like, what, 4 or 6, somewhere around there.
Mm-hmm.
And to be able to go on the plane, and just this elderly lady asked me like, hey, how many times have you flown? I was like, well, today's like my third time, and I haven't flown since I was a kid. So when I explain how I went to Florida, people are like, "You love it?" I know you don't go anywhere. I was like, I love being on an airplane more than actually being in a hotel. You know, I feel more peaceful and alive being on an airplane than I did swimming in water and seeing
Mm-hmm.
alligators and going to a business conference and going out eating dinner, I feel more alive because um, that's always what I enjoyed growing up is planes and cards and things like that, and
Mhm.
to be able to be like, dang, I get to fly and I get to look out a window, everything's so peaceful, So
Mhm.
it was always like I had to open my eyes and like, hey, people, the wealthiness will come, you just gotta trust God. God has it in your plan, but are you really giving your plan to God or are you making your own plan? And I really have to realize like, hey, I can't make my own plan. Only God can make my plan for me. So it was just a lot of different situations
Mhm.
that I think about, and now I'm realizing and like I said, friends too, situations with that. But um, even if you make mistakes or someone
Mhm.
else makes mistakes, you just have to move past it, because if you let that keep going through your mind,
Correct.
you're not going to get anywhere,
Mhm.
and that's something I've had to realize a few months ago. Yes, a few months ago, I've had to realize, like, hey, you know, you met a wonderful woman. Um, you're starting to open your horizons, so don't mess those things, those values up, thinking about the past. And that's what I've been doing the last few years,
Mhm.
is just thinking about the past. How can I prevent myself from messing up this relationship? How could I gotten help sooner, or
Mhm.
how can I have learned about this money making opportunity, or how can I do this and do that? No, and now I'm thinking ahead. I'm doing the right way what I want to do for myself.
Mhm.
I'm not putting others first. And that's why I brought up the hospital situation, because I've got the chance to talk and help a lot of people. So when they're like, when some patients were like, well, you look like you got it all together. No, I don't have it all together. I was struggling in life still, struggling to keep a roof over my head and to keep a vehicle. But
Mhm.
now it's like, um, okay, I get to do what I want in a humbly good way now. Um, I still listen to others, but some information others give you isn't always a good information.
Correct.
So
Mhm.
now I always tell people go to God. And
Mhm.
friends are like, how do you deal with anxiety? And I was just like, well, I personally don't deal with anxiety. I still feel anxious, but God deals with it for me.
That is correct.
So
That's good. Mhm.
I remember about a year ago, I told my mom, I was like, I want to learn to be more patient. And I pray about patience. She was just like, well, God's not just going to give you patience. He's going to put you in situations to test your patience. That's
Mhm.
how you learn
Mhm.
to become patient. So it's like, yeah. So overall, like I said, I still struggle with mental health today. But I give everything to God, and I learned the value of my life. Because when you're in that situation or in that mindset, you got everybody's in your ear. That's a cowardly way to go, which it is kind of true. But sometimes you got to reword things. But they're like, "What about your little brother? What about this? What about that? He's seen this, he's seen that." People bring up those situations like that,
Mhm.
but it's just like that comes to the point where you feel like people's not listening. You know, because it's like you bring up all this stuff like, "Duh, I know I have siblings. I know about these people and that," but it's just like you're bringing these things up, but at the same time, you're not wondering how I'm feeling. Instead of like bringing that up, like, yes, I know I have a little brother that I deeply and truly love, but it's like, um, it's it's like at the same time I'm still going through what I'm going through. So yeah,
I think that we go through a lot of things because it's not for us.
yeah,
What you go through is not for you. Like I've been sitting here listening to you tell your story, and a lot of stuff that you went through was for those people that you got to talk to. And I think when we finally get to realize that, then we look at what God is trying to do for us and how we can help people. And I say it all the time in my book when I wrote about it, if I have to go through this over and over to help a million women or a million whoever people that's going through what I went through, I would do it again. Because it's like I want people to know, because I want people to know the relationship with God. Like that's why with you, it's like I didn't teach you. You seen me talk about God. You seen what God was doing for me, but I didn't teach you that directly until you got older. And I wish I would have, but I didn't learn these things as a kid, so I didn't know how to teach it to you because I was single mom. I had you at 20, so I'm trying to figure out who God was because at that point, I had to figure out how to raise a young man until God sent your dad, RT. So it was those things, but when we begin to realize, we see that you see now that better days are coming. And what you said was like, you have to change your mind. If you don't change your mind, then you're going to be stuck in the past. And like you said, I'm moving forward now. I got to go ahead. I can't see what's back there. You can keep what's back there to help others, but you don't want to be, otherwise you'll be stuck. And the main thing you said was like, okay, you have a new relationship. That's another thing. You have to work on you, because if you don't work on you, you can't love that person, or you can't love a wife. You know, like I even throughout me and your dad's marriage, God had to work on me, because there were times where I know for a fact that it was like, oh my God, like I'm causing this in our marriage, because it's like I got all this stuff going on that I don't talk about, and it's building up. Your dad has no clue what's going on with me because I'm just blowing up because of little things. My blow up could be like, oh, you left the shoes at the door, but it was deeper than that. He didn't know that. You know, he didn't know that because I didn't tell him. But I had to learn how to deal with what I went through in the past and leave it in the past, even as an adult. And like I said, I'm glad you talked about your story today. Like I said, it wasn't a pressure. It was something that if you wanted to talk about, you could talk about. But I'm glad that you're able to talk about it, because I can remember a time where you was looking at me like, you're crazy. Like, no, I'm never telling anybody any of this. You know, I'm telling you these things. And I'm like, well, CJ, like, you're looking at me like, no, yeah, whatever. You know, I'm so glad that you're getting to know God for yourself, because that's what God wanted. I could not be your God. I can tell you all day how good God is. I can tell you all day that the things that God is doing for me, but you have to see that for yourself. And that comes through healing. And you can't heal properly until you take that time with God, until you pray, until you read this word, until you meditate. When you take that time is when you begin to see the things that you talked about today. And that's when we begin to see that better days are coming. We have to see those things as though they were. We can't sit back and say, oh, I'm never going to get this, because if you think you're never going to get a house, you're never going to get a house. But if you say, I'm going to have a mansion one day, then you're going to work towards that. You're going to be like, God, what do I need to do to get there? What is it that you have for me to do so I can get there one day? But it's not about houses and cars. It's about the relationship and knowing who God is and what he can do, because God is better than a house. He's better than a car. He's better than money. God gives us favor. Favor is better than anything. The things that you could say, okay, Lord, I want a house, but then once you become obedient, that house, he may not see you the money for the house. Somebody could say, you know what? I've been watching you, and I'm getting ready to move, and I got this house I want to give you. That's how good God is. Like, God is so just amazing. Like, anything, I'm pretty sure you're seeing that now. Anything you go through, he can just, that's why some days, me and you talk, some days we don't. When you're going through your stuff, I just let you be. And I just go and I pray. Because that's what a mom does. I pray for you, because as a mother, you don't want to see your kid go through that. But now, the relationship I have with God, I know God got you. So I don't want you everything like my mom don't love me. I just know God got you. If you're going through something, I'm going to hang up, because if you're going through something and you upset, I might get upset, or I might, that's going to start something. So I'll be like, okay, I'll talk to you later, and I'll hang up from you. But as a mother, you want the best for your child. And so that's where my relationship had to come with God, because I have 2 boys. I don't have any girls. I had the slightest idea what it was. I asked God for a girl because I knew it was going to be easy to raise a girl, because I'm a woman. And God gave me the opposite. But you know why? It got me closer to him. When I became a mother, it's like, okay, God, I need you now, because I need to know how to raise him to be a man until you send a man to help me raise him to be a man. So that's how good God is. And I'm glad that you're beginning to see these things. And I'm glad that you're like, the topic tonight was better days are coming. And God has so much for you, CJ. Stop crying. That you don't even see. God shows me things that he has for you, but you have to see it for yourself. And you have to continue your walk with God. And you can never give up what God is doing. Some things God may tell you and it may not even sound right. But you still got to do it. He could tell you to do something, you ain't got not one dime in your pocket. But you have to trust him. Like I said, 2 Corinthians 5:7, we walk by faith and not by sight. So you have to trust God in your walk with him and continue to trust him and continue to tell your story. Maybe one day you may want to write about it. Maybe one day you want to just continue to talk about it. You know, so mental health is real. I had to find that out for myself. I didn't find out that mental health was real until it happened in my home with you. And God had to show me that there's other people out here. So I advocate for mental health now because of that. Because there's so many people out here and you're wearing the shirt. I'm going to say this and then we're going to wrap it up. But I Matter, We Matter is a organization that we both got to experience with Jamie Dotson. So to learn more about that, check out my Facebook page. I'll have that information up. But I just kind of want to wrap it up. Thank you for telling your story, son. It was amazing to hear your story because a lot of stuff that you just talked about, I never knew. This is my first time in some things I did know. So I appreciate you coming on and telling your story. And I pray that whoever needs to hear your story, they watch this and it gives them light and it lets them know that better days are coming. So we're going to wrap up the show tonight, this recording tonight. And I just pray that you guys have a blessed night. And I pray that whoever needs to see it. And if you know someone who is dealing with mental health, please send them the link or have them follow my Facebook page at GCMS, which is capitalized God Changed My Story. Thank you and have a blessed night. Bye.
Now everything's alright since you helped me. He dried my tears away.